Stop. Right there. Most people think the Titanic story ends when the ship disappears beneath the waves at 2:20 a.m. They think the introduction ends, the screen goes black, and that's it. They're wrong. For the 700 survivors freezing in tiny wooden lifeboats, watching 1,500 perish in the Atlantic, the nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. What followed wasn't just survival, it was a brutal tale of legal battles, public humiliation, shattered careers, and a massive cover-up designed to protect the rich and crush the common people. This is the untold story of what really happened after the Titanic sank. If you're ready to see the historical side that movies have overlooked, hit the subscribe button. Let's go back to 1912. Imagine this. It's 4 a.m. on April 15th. You're crammed into a lifeboat. The Atlantic Ocean is blacker than ink, and the air? Bone-chillingly cold. Your breath looks like ghostly apparitions hovering before you. Just an hour ago, you witnessed the world's largest ship break in two. You heard the screams of 1,500 people falling into water that was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, colder than your freezer, cold enough to kill a person in 15 minutes. But now, silence. The screaming stopped 20 minutes ago, and that silence, it's infinitely worse. You're staring at the dark horizon, your toes numb, your fingers burning with cold, waiting for dawn, waiting to see if the people you love are still alive. And sitting right there among the traumatized survivors was a man named Bruce Ismay. Remember that name. Bruce wasn't just a passenger, he was the chairman of the White Star Line. He owned the ship. He was the man who created the unsinkable myth, cramming people onto it and sending it hurtling into an icy abyss. And Bruce, he survived. Survived. That sounds good, right? But the problem is, 1,500 people died, including women and children, and yet the wealthy boss still managed to get a spot on a lifeboat. The media was about to devour him. He was about to become the most hated man in America. Suddenly, lights appeared on the horizon. It was the RMS Carpathia. Captain Arthur Rostron had pushed the ship's engines to their limits, dodging the ice at a dangerous speed to get there. Bringing 700 psychologically traumatized, paralyzed men aboard the ship in the middle of the ocean was a chaotic scene. The crew was pulling people up with cables. And what they found was horrifying. Broken bones, fractures, people in complete coma staring blankly into space with empty eyes. And frostbite. Oh, frostbite. The survivors had been sitting in the freezing water for hours. Their feet were white and waxy. Their limbs were stiff. The Carpathia's 3 doctors were sorting patients on the dining tables, trying to save their limbs. Take Harold Bride, for example. He was a 22-year-old wireless telegraph operator. He stayed in his place until the water reached his room. He clung to an overturned lifeboat for hours. When he was pulled ashore, his legs were ravaged by the cold. One was sprained, the other had turned black. And what did he do? He didn't sleep. He couldn't stand, but he resolutely operated the Carpathia's wireless telegraph for 3 days straight, sending messages to the survivors while his numb legs dangled in bandages. That was heroism. Meanwhile, what about Bruce Ismay? He locked himself in a cabin. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep, he just stared at the walls, trembling like a leaf. He was a broken man. But the world didn't know Ismay had fallen apart. They only knew he was alive. And in Washington, D.C., a senator named William Alden Smith was reading the headlines, and he was furious. Mr. Smith knew Captain Smith, the captain of the Titanic. He had met him years before and considered him an absolutely trustworthy sailor. Now that captain was dead, and Senator Smith wanted to know why. He called the White House. President Taft was too preoccupied with grieving the loss of his close friend on board. So Mr. Smith took matters into his own hands. He drafted a resolution demanding that the Senate conduct a formal investigation. But there was a catch, a very big catch. The survivors were on a British ship, the Carpathia, bound for New York. The crew were all British citizens. As soon as they disembarked, they could escape to England, and Smith would never get the answers he needed. Then Smith's office intercepted a telegram. It was sent under the code name Yampsy, just Ismay spelled backward. Not exactly James Bond-level espionage, is it? The telegram ordered the White Star Line to hold the ship, named Cedric, so Ismay and his crew could escape to England immediately. No questioning, no investigation. Senator Smith said, absolutely not. April 18, 1912. The Carpathia docked in New York. The scene was one of utter chaos. 30,000 people were screaming on the dock. Reporters, desperate families, ambulances, a floating hospital ferry. They expected 2,000 injured, but only 700 survived. Senator Smith was there, and he didn't wait. He boarded the Carpathia before the survivors disembarked. He held a summons in his hand. He walked straight across the ship, ignoring the no-knock sign on a cabin door, and stormed in. He found Philip Franklin, the company's vice president, who tried to stop him. "Ismay is too ill," Franklin said. Smith essentially replied, "I'll judge that myself." He handed over the papers right there. Bruce Ismay, the surviving officers, and the entire crew aren't going anywhere. The investigation will begin tomorrow morning at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. The doors are locked, the cameras are ready. The next morning, the East Room of the Waldorf Astoria was packed, hot, noisy. Flashlights flashed incessantly like fireworks. And at the center of it all was Bruce Ismay. He looked like a ghost. He hadn't eaten in 4 days, and now he had to answer to the whole world. The press had nicknamed him J. Brute Ismay. They called him a coward. They said he had cast aside women to save himself. They said he had pressured the captain to speed up the ship to get attention. Senator Smith began to question him. "Did you pressure the captain to speed up?" Ismay replied, "No, absolutely not." "Did you consult with anyone about the ship's movements?" "No." Then the big question came. How did you get off the ship? Ismay took a breath. He explained that the boat was being lowered. The officer shouted for more women. There were no women on deck, no passengers left, so he jumped. "No passengers on deck?" Smith pressed. Ismay insisted, "No, sir." "But we know that's not true. There were still over 1,000 people on board when Ismay boarded that ship. Most of them were dead. And now the captain was declaring the deck empty." The room was buzzing. Reporters were writing frantically. Ismay was becoming increasingly guilty. And he had made a tactical mistake. He started complaining about his detention in America. He questioned whether the investigation was legal. Wrong move, Bruce. Now he not only looked like a coward, he looked like a self-proclaimed coward trying to evade the law. The Senate Investigation Committee didn't just question Ismay, they questioned everyone. And the stories they gathered? Utterly shocking. Let's meet Second Officer Charles Lightoller, the highest-ranking surviving crew member. A real-life hero, a cowboy, a gold prospector, a shipwreck survivor. But on the night the ship sank, he made a decision that cost hundreds of lives. Senator Smith asked him, why did the lifeboats leave the dock with only half the men on board? What was Lightoller's excuse? He interpreted women and children first as only women and children. He launched the lifeboats with empty seats instead of allowing a man on board. A lifeboat designed for 65 people set sail with only 40. Smith pressed him, why? Lightoller said he feared the crane's cable would snap if the boat was full. What was his plan? Lower the boat with only half its weight, then have people board through the hatches near the water's edge. The problem? The hatches never opened. The men he sent to open them were all dead. The boat sailed away almost empty. Hundreds drowned because Lightoller gambled and lost. And then, the most blatant lie. The Attorney General asked him directly, did the ship break in two? Many survivors witnessed the stern of the ship rise, snap, and fall. They heard the screeching of metal. What was Lightoller's answer? That is absolutely untrue. The ship did not and could not have broken in two. He lied. He knew that admitting the White Star's unsinkable ship had crumbled like a branch would damage the company's reputation. He was a man loyal to the company to the very end. Next came the rich and famous, Sir Cosmo and his wife Lucy Duff Gordon. They escaped in lifeboat number 1, capacity 40 people, number of people on board 12. 12 people in a boat meant for only 40. Meanwhile, thousands more were screaming and drowning around them. The situation was even worse. Someone suggested rowing back to help those who were drowning. This idea was rejected. Rumors circulated that Sir Cosmo feared they would be swept away. Then there was the matter of money. In the midst of that freezing hell, Sir Cosmo promised each of his 7 crew members £5, about $700 today. He said it was a charitable donation to help them buy new equipment, but the whole world called it bribery, money to keep them from rowing back to save the dying. Sir Cosmo testified. He admitted he thought saving someone from drowning would be a great thing to do, but he didn't do it. He just sat there. While the Titanic was sinking, another ship was very close. It was the SS Californian. The ship's telegraph operator had gone to sleep 10 minutes before the Titanic struck the iceberg. He missed the distress calls. But the crew on deck saw something. They saw white flares exploding in the sky. 8 of them. It was a distress signal. They informed their captain, Stanley Lord. Lord's reaction? Nothing. He dismissed it as a company signal. He went back to sleep. When Captain Lord testified, Senator Smith debunked his testimony. You saw the missiles. You knew the Titanic was nearby. Didn't you think that was it? Lord replied, no. He denied all accusations. The investigation concluded that if the Californian had simply switched on its radio or moved toward the missiles, it could have saved almost everyone. Captain Lord spent the rest of his life trying to clear his name. He died in disgrace. The American investigation was intense. It exposed the truth, and the British hated it. They saw Senator Smith as a meddling American interfering in their affairs. So they started their own investigation in London. And to whom did they entrust the investigation? Lord Mersey, a man who had dined with shipping executives and raised a glass to celebrate protecting their profits from the law. This wasn't an investigation, it was a remediation. The British investigation was a farce. It was held in a huge, reverberant hall where no one could hear anything. And guess what? They didn't invite anyone to testify. A single third-class passenger. Over 500 third-class passengers perished. They were trapped below deck, lost in a labyrinth of corridors, not knowing how to reach the lifeboats. And the British investigation didn't even ask any of them what happened. Their final report? A joke. They concluded that there was no structural reason why third-class passengers had more difficulty escaping. Yeah, that's right. Tell that to the families of those who died. After 36 days, Judge Lord Mersey delivered his verdict. It was a masterful display of evasiveness. The ship was going too fast? Yes. Not enough lifeboats? Yes. The Californian's crew failed to act in time? Yes. But who was to blame? No one. Captain Smith, who ignored the ice warnings and ventured into the danger zone? The report stated he only made a mistake. It wasn't negligence, as other captains did the same. He was simply following normal procedure. It was a cover-up. The system only protected its own interests. The shipping industry received only a minor penalty, and 1,500 deaths went unpunished. So, the official investigations were just a sham. The rich protected the rich. But what about the victims? Surely the company was responsible for the deaths of 1,500 people, right? Absolutely wrong. This is where the story gets truly horrifying. The survivors lost everything: husbands, fathers, all their possessions. They sued the White Star Line for a total of $16 million, equivalent to $500 million today. What was White Star's response? They hired a large team of lawyers and unearthed a little-known law from 1851. This law stipulated that if the disaster wasn't their fault, their legal liability would be limited to the value of anything salvaged from the wreck. What was salvaged? A few lifeboats and some salvaged cargo. Total value? $91,000. That's it. With 1,500 dead and serious damage, the White Star only demanded a total of $91,000. That's about $60 per dead. It's an utter disgrace. The legal battle lasted 4 years. Lawyers forced the psychologically traumatized survivors to recount details of their drownings repeatedly during interrogations. These cases highlighted the vast gap between rich and poor. Margaret Brown, a wealthy woman from the upper class, sued for $27,000 for lost furs and jewelry. Another couple sought compensation for a brand-new Renault found at the bottom of the ocean. But what about third-class passengers? A man named Young He filed a claim for just £9. That was for his lost clothes. That was all he owned in the world. In 1916, exhausted and penniless, the survivors settled. The White Star paid a total of only $664,000. That's just 4 pence for every dollar they claimed in compensation. This law worked exactly as intended. It protected the powerful shipping industry and crushed ordinary citizens. If that doesn't anger you, look at how they treated the crew. Do you know that heroic band, 8 musicians who played until the water reached their feet? They all died. A few weeks later, the parents of the young violinist Jock Hume received a letter from the Manpower Company. Was it a condolence letter or a bonus? No, it was a bill. They were demanding payment for the uniforms that his grieving parents had lost. They were demanding payment for the clothes that a hero had drowned in. And what about the rest of the crew? Southampton was devastated. 549 local men were killed. Overnight, hundreds of women became widows without income. And guess when they stopped receiving their wages? Not when they returned to land. Their wages stopped at 2:20 a.m. on April 15th. That was the exact moment the ship sank. If you were freezing to death in a lifeboat, you were officially considered unemployed. Welcome to labor relations in 1912. The lawsuits are over, but the horror never ends. The psychological trauma has altered the brain structure of the survivors. Take Frank Goldsmith as an example. He was 9 years old when he witnessed his father disappear on the ship's deck. He survived, grew up, and moved to a baseball stadium in Detroit. But he could never attend a game. Why? Because every time the crowd cheered after a batting, the roar sounded exactly like the screams of 1,500 people in the middle of the freezing Atlantic Ocean. And what about Bruce Ismay, the man who saved himself? He became a ghost. His wife forbade the word Titanic from being mentioned in the house. He resigned in disgrace and moved to a small, secluded house in Ireland. He lived the rest of his life as a recluse, afraid to look anyone in the eye, tormented by guilt for surviving. He died of depression in 1937. The last survivor, Milvina Dean, only passed away in 2009. Think about that. The ghost of that fateful night still haunts us to this day. So 1,500 people died in vain? Not entirely. Their deaths forced a wake-up call to the world. The rules changed almost overnight. Thanks to the Titanic disaster, we have the International Ice Patrol. They monitor icebergs in the Atlantic, and they haven't lost a ship to icebergs since 1912. Thanks to the Titanic disaster, laws were enacted requiring all ships to have a radio operator on duty 24/7. No more sleepy operators watching others die nearby. And most importantly, they updated the regulations regarding lifeboats. Every cruise ship you board today has a seat for each person on board because of what happened that night. The wreck of the Titanic now lies at the bottom of the ocean, 2.5 miles deep, slowly being corroded by bacteria. In just a few decades, it will be gone forever. But the story isn't over. Why are we still haunted by it after a century? Because it's a warning. The builders of the Titanic thought they had conquered nature. They had complete faith in their technology. They believed the ship was unsinkable, and the ocean proved them wrong in less than 3 hours. Today, we still make that mistake. We build things and assume they will last forever. The sinking of the Titanic reminds us that no matter how big, how expensive, or how technologically advanced something is, never be complacent, because the iceberg you don't see is always the one that will sink you. Thank you for watching. If you learned something new about the true story of the Titanic, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analyses of the darkest moments in history. See you next time.